Hello and welcome to another episode of the AI Relay. I am Andrew Signori.
And I'm Jonathan Spanos.
John, by the way, I think this is episode 13.
I
Lucky
think it's
number.
12. I think we miscounted
Okay.
last week, actually.
All
This
right.
is episode
Fair
12.
enough. All right.
Yeah.
Good. 12. Episode 12, everybody, if you've hung in this long.
It's a milestone nonetheless.
So I actually had an idea for this after our conversation I think we had last week, and maybe a couple of conversations that we've had, where when I start describing like the types of AI agents that I'm building at work, and I work in a large enterprise, it became clear that like your idea of what an agent is and what the types of agents say that like we're building at work and the types of programs that are around AI agents, because there's a big push to leverage them, what they are, and I realized that like, man, John's idea at first I said like, John's somewhat new to AI. Like you've been deep in it for, let's call it, 6 months.
Fair enough.
And I probably like at work we've been probably maybe let's call it 2.5 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of like what an agent is has evolved quite a bit from like before that was even a thing, where it was just chatbots, right? To like, all right, well, what's an agent, right? Like let's take this, and like I think the earliest example is like something that was called a GPT, and they're still out there. Like a GPT was just when you took like Chat GPT and you scoped it with like a real specific system prompt, and maybe you'd add like some files it would use for like a simple RAG database, and you could publish it, right? And you could be like, hey, ask my Yankee trivia chatbot all the stuff about Yankee trivia, and,
like a specialized, what we would now call agent, but like a super specialized agent,
right?
Yes.
That just sits out there autonomously, and then like that evolved, right? And like from that became agents running as like just autonomous pieces of code running on a server somewhere, waiting for a trigger, whether that trigger was a chat,
a question, or
email, or like whatever it is that agent was supposed to react
yeah,
to.
maybe it was like a thermostat, and it's just waiting for that input data to trigger it to do whatever it's designed specifically to do.
Right. And like I can tell you that like in the enterprise, that is like what an agent's task is, right? It's like, oh, we need something to do this task, right? So like maybe it's a real annoying task, like requesting a DNS change, right? In an enterprise. That's like like there might be 2 teams involved, or like whatever. There might be like multiple approval processes that need to happen.
And something that happens frequently enough that it's a pain in the ass, right? Because if something's a pain in the ass like once in a while, you just kind of deal with it. But if it's this constant pain in the ass, that's exactly where I could imagine an agent coming to mind. Like, oh, let me build the solution to this.
And this is how we approach agents in the enterprise, or at least in my enterprise, is that like, there are tasks that we'd love it if like something could do it like agentically or autonomously. So like we're going to build like an agent to do this thing. And
yeah. So 1 second right there, right? Because you just said agentically or autonomously, but that's interesting, because before AI or before ChatGPT hit the world, right? Like there were autonomous things happening, right? You can script autonomous things. So did the agents come into play on the enterprise level to do things that could almost be automated, but just not quite? And so you need a mind to kind of bridge that gap or close that circle.
So, I mean, this is a super interesting topic in and of itself. Right?
I digress.
Like agentic versus autonomous, and like programmatic autonomous. And
right.
Like when is it right to use AI, and when is it best to use something that is,
deterministic, or some combination thereof? Isn't a kind of combination of that
Typically,
an agent?
that's what that is it, right? It's a combination of the two of those things.
So like, there were things that were you were able to automate things for decades through software and through developers at the job, right? You have a problem, you go to developer. I'm getting this because you've told me about this. I've never worked in an enterprise, but like Developers will build you the tool. It's a piece of software. It's automated. Fantastico. But that, I could imagine that gets up to a point. You say this layer of stuff that needs to get done. It's like 90% automatable, but like I have to be part of it so that I can make certain choices or something.
I mean, that's part of
Enter,
it for
you know,
sure. Where like there's a level of reasoning that has to take place in order for that automation to move on, and like that reasoning layer can now be replaced with AI, where it was like once person,
a human, right?
a human, right? But then like and there's another side of it too, where it's like, well, actually, a lot of this stuff could potentially be automated, but it wasn't worth the capital to automate that thing because of like how much time and how much money it would cost to automate a task that was maybe like, yeah, you could automate it, but like it wouldn't be worth spending $200,000, to automate a task that
For
costs
this
us
tiny
maybe,
task.
yeah, maybe that task only costs us $3,000 a year, to do it, right? So
So
it's like,
you
why do I spend
so you
200
throw an
grand
LLM at it.
automating? Yeah, well, like, but that's when it like agents change all of it, right? Because two things. One is like you can now have an agent code that thing that would have cost you $200,000 and now it costs you nothing. Or you could just have like an agent reason through the whole problem like a person would. Like whatever the person was doing before, just have an agent do that step. So there's a couple of ways to like approach it and ways that like agents and AI can help solve that problem. But like that's like its own like conversation.
Yes, indeed.
I
Not
feel
what we're
like,
here today.
but as far as like the gap that exists between the enterprises, that like enterprises move slow, right? And when we like, and
Well,
when
let me pause you there and back up because I heard you say that like I probably misinterpreted or misunderstood, and I would bet you $5 that I did misunderstand because I am coming from non-tech. I've never done any of these kinds of things, right? But I'm completely into it for 6 months or
right,
whatever. So it's fair for you. I consider it completely fair for you who's been working for decades, using AI for years already, to come to me and be like, "Yo, whenever you're talking about agents, bro, like you're wrong." But like,
so,
how am
and
I
at
wrong?
first, dude, that was sort of that was my thought, is that like, you know what, John's perspective is probably a little bit more narrow because when you got introduced to AI, agents were this other thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
This new layer of abstraction where like an agent can have like control of a computer rather than just like, hey, I'm going to plug in a tool, I'm going to let you search the web, or I'm going to let you look at this database. Right now, you're talking about like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
the agent can operate a computer, and so at first my thought was like, oh, that's just like a narrow view because you're new to AI and you haven't been around long enough to understand that there are these other AI ideas of AI agents that were just these pockets of code sitting there with an agent with an LLM behind it that was doing this very
Kind of different definitions of what you might call an agent, I guess.
right.
And I reasonably would be coming at it from like, I think you even said last week, like the first instance of an agent that you come across, like that's what
Is
you end up defining what an agent is in your
totally
mind. And I think that's
right.
probably pretty fair.
And so for a little while, like, and so I ruminated on, I was thinking of this as like a topic for this week's podcast. But the more I thought about it, right, the more I just had like thought exercises around like AI and agents, and I thought to myself, well, there of course is going to be the next level of abstraction or the next advancement in like agentic technology, and John, for example, like he's going to jump on that as soon as as soon as that becomes available. So it's not
That's
so
right.
much
That's
that
right.
that it's like your idea is actually broader and ready
Hmm.
to expand,
Hmm.
and the enterprise is still locked in to what is a myopic view of agents, right? And
Hmm.
it's like they're actually. So I realized like I went through like a period where it went from you know John's got blinders on to actually
Hmm.
no. John has a much broader vision of what an AI agent can be. And the enterprise is actually stuck in this
Hmm.
idea that an agent is this little piece of code that's going to sit there and maybe it'll talk to another little piece of code that's going to sit there. and the two, or maybe there'll be a third piece of code that's going to sit and orchestrate between these two other independent, pockets of
Mm-hmm.
code,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's like, and that is the, like the enterprise's view of what an agent is. And I'm like, so I think that's probably a symptom of of a sickness, or it's like in its inability to like mature at a rate that is necessary because AI is maturing at a rate that maybe John Spanos and Andrew Signori we can keep up,
Yeah,
barely,
right.
but
We
like
can pivot, we can pivot, we can absorb, we can test and play and experiment like nightly, before and after work or whatever. And the enterprise,
right,
it's funny you say the word mature, it's because like in a way, because the enterprise is so mature as a giant entity, like it gets stuck, like all entities get stuck in these archetypal grooves. We all do throughout our lives. As we grow up, we create habits and we create opinions, and we get stuck in the word archetype. It's amazing that like it only took 2 years for enterprise to create an archetypal, stuck position on something, though. It didn't take decades of constant use. So they're already like they tried it once. And I guess to your point, like enterprise thought about it once, solved it, and like that's it. Now that's what we have. We have these little independent agents that are
right.
super scoped, safe, right? Because there is that part too for enterprises. They're not like it's safe, it's reliable. We know what it is.
Like and in defense of the enterprise, right? The enterprise needs to make sure that like we're not exposing sensitive data to the public,
Mm,
that like that we're not allowing like a proliferation of agents that like built in a million different ways, managed in a million different ways. Like we've got there needs to be an effort to kind of guide and make sure that there's some consistency and standards to the way agents are built. But like on the flip side, like that needs to evolve as fast as the technology is evolving, and enterprises are just barges
yeah,
or
that
like
that
an aircraft carrier.
right.
They're not nimble. They're not going to be able to like change their ways.
I mean, just even the decision making is slow. Not even like the actual actionable things when it
For
comes
sure.
to anything that large. I mean, it's a bureaucracy, whether it's in public government or if it's in a giant enterprise. It's a
Right.
bureaucracy of steps and layers.
Yeah. You're not a developer, but you're someone who has built AI agents, many agents, right?
Hmm.
Like I'm not a developer
Right.
professionally. Like I've built a bunch of agents, right? But we've both done that using coding agents, right? Like
Right.
we managed coding agents, and those agents built other agents,
That's
right?
right.
But 2 years ago, when enterprises were like planning how are we going to incorporate AI into our business, right? These things didn't exist. So like the only way to build an agent was like if you had a developer that knew Python,
You needed a coder, someone who
you
could
needed the
code.
developer, right? So like the developers ended up being in charge of developing AI agents for the enterprise.
Hmm.
And just as like a lawyer doesn't want to think AI can do legal stuff better than they can, developers also don't want to think that the AI agent can code as well as they can. So in the enterprise, it became this thing where it was like, all right, we're the developers with the coding skills, and you're the teams with the domain specific knowledge. Like we're going to get together, we're going to build agents. And like 2 years ago, that was a great idea, right? Like that was the necessary formula in order to get an agent built in your enterprise. Until coding agents.
Hmm.
Now coding agents can build the agents. So now all you need is the domain expertise. It's like I know this and you know this. We're both doing it now and we're building
Right.
agents. But
Right.
in the enterprise, the team that's still in charge of, you know, directing the ship are the developers,
And the
right?
developers.
And these
And
are the
they're
taxi
not using,
drivers. The
they're
taxi drivers
probably
that are
using.
in a position to evaluate self-driving cars. And
Right.
nobody likes to think that a taxi driver would never want to think that a self-driving car is good enough to replace them. So you
Yeah.
still have teams of developers in an enterprise that like, and this is like this is just a symptom of moving too slow, and what are you going to, like, and not maturing the software development lifecycle as fast as like AI has matured the speed to code software.
I think the moving too slow part is pretty natural too. It's not to like dump on anybody. Human nature, when it feels danger, it tends to get conservative and pull in and want to stop all change from happening until the danger's past.
Right.
And it's unfortunately, I think, the exact opposite way of successfully dealing with danger. But it's just one of those weird, like, backward things about nature. We do stupid things backwards, right? So I can understand a developer's first instinct, let's say, is to defend itself, but there is a broader conversation on the AI enthusiast side, I guess, right? The non-enterprise, the non-developer developers can be AI enthusiasts, obviously, but uh, that like it's not about losing your job. You said it before too. You're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to someone who knows how to use AI. And we're now even still defining what use AI means. And I think there's a general consensus. It's how I feel about it is that I'm managing something that creates the output. I no longer am the thing that creates the output. And shifting the position of the effectiveness, your effectiveness in that process,
Right.
doesn't mean you're going to get replaced. Or the taxi driver, like imagine the taxi driver, instead of getting upset about having a self-driving car, the taxi driver might be like, this is sweet. I don't have to drive. I could be like a concierge. I'm in there with chocolates. I can make you a coffee. You want some music, right? Like I don't have to drive the car. Now I can turn around and do other things instead of being like, I need to drive the car. So we get scared. We want to hold on to things that are
I think it's
changing rapidly around us.
it's human nature. I also think too that like on the enthusiast side, like there's a gap, right? So like we just recognized like there's a gap in the enterprise where like it's failing to recognize or at least to adjust for this for the like the rate of progress in AI. And that's like evident, I would say, in my enterprise with like our approach to building AI agents, which
Mm-hmm.
is which was the right stuff in 2024 and maybe in
Mm-hmm.
2026. It's still building a 2024 agent, right? We're not building an agent. What is an
Right.
agent in 2026?
You're probably only just getting good at doing what you were trying to do in
But it's
24.
like, who out there knows what is an agent in 2026? And it's like
I think
the
it's an open
enthusiast.
question.
Well, like enthusiasts know what that
Mm.
is, right? You know what that is, right? You're an enthusiast, but like, and you're not in the enterprise.
Right. Yeah.
But there's a gap that exists with enthusiasts that like think they know and they don't know.
About other
It,
domains.
and the enterprise being so, I saw. So we're going to take this in a completely different direction and say like from the other side
Mm.
of like the AI
Yeah. Like
enthusiasts.
so you just made me feel better that like I'm not wrong.
Right, you're not
but
wrong.
now tell me where I am wrong. Like why am I wrong?
AI enthusiasts, they understand understand the impact that AI could have on enterprises, right? But
Hmm.
from what I've seen, like they don't really understand the problems that exist within the enterprise, and they're misguided, right? And I'll give you an example, right, of Jesse Eisenberg. He has this show called the Startup Ideas Podcast. I love it. Watch it
Shout
all the
out.
time. If you're out there, shout out to Jesse. This isn't a dig on you. But he made a reference in that like, hey, the name of the show is Startup Ideas Podcast, and he had this great idea for a startup idea that like, hey, you could be selling like local models to enterprises so that like everything like it will address the privacy concern.
It's a big conversation right now on the AI enthusiast side, at least.
Right.
Is the local, it's the open source, it's the privacy. All of these things are kind of bundling together. It seems in some kind of conversation that people are trying to articulate right now.
And when I think of Jesse Eisenberg, I still consider him. He is a thought leader in AI.
Hmm.
He has, many followers. He is consistently putting out great content, and it's like super, and I found it like incredibly useful. But what I realized was that like, man, like what he doesn't have is any sort of perspective into the enterprise, and he's not even familiar with like the AI platforms that the enterprises are already using. And maybe he just hasn't put two and two
Well, like,
together.
so
I'll give you an
being
example.
like when you say AI platforms, since I'm not enterprise, I
Right.
immediately imagine I can see the ChatGPT window on my desktop, the Claude.ai application. I mean, that's what when I hear
Right.
enterprise platform, that's what I think. Is
Right.
that not what you're talking about?
That is not what I'm talking about. Right.
Hmm.
So like when you use, let's say you want to use Anthropic's service, right? You have the ability to go to Anthropic and say, I want to use Claude, give me an API key, and I'm going to pay as I go. Or I'm going to I'm going to fund my little account here with $100 worth of tokens.
It's pretty
And
much what
I'm
we
going to
do in
use,
the OpenClaw world or the
right,
Hermes world, right? I'm wiring it through my
exactly.
OAuth token or whatever it is.
Enterprises, they're able to go to AWS and say, you know what, like spin me up my own personal instance of Anthropic's Claude 4.7, right? That I don't want to send information to Anthropic. I want to just send information like internally to our internal AWS accounts, right? Because we can route all things like through our internal
Hmm.
network into AWS. Never goes out to the internet, right?
Hmm.
And I want all that data to stay within my AWS account. Well, we already have the ability to run frontier models like this, right? If I want to run a private instance of the best frontier model available, I can. It's a radio button in AWS. Like all I need to do is turn it on, and I have a private instance of Claude 4.7, Opus 4.7 available to me. No concerns about privacy. No concerns about data leakage. Right? No telemetry is being sent to Anthropic. I'm paying AWS for these tokens, and AWS and Anthropic have.
AWS.
I'm
You're
paying
paying
AWS
AWS for the tokens now.
because
So
their
there is a
model.
disconnect. You've cut the cable between Anthropic and your company.
Yes.
And Anthropic, this is news to the non-enterprise mind like mine at least. You're saying that like AWS and Anthropic have made a deal
Yes.
so that like AWS can say to its customers, your company, hey, you now can use Anthropic's actual models, but let's say sandboxed off from Anthropic. It's in here. It only stays in here. And since the cloud has been a trusted privacy system for over a decade, right? Like the problem isn't data privacy, is what you're saying.
Well, that problem's already been solved, is what I'm saying. Is that like it certainly
Right.
is a problem, and it prevents like enterprises from like using Anthropic's instance of Claude. But the idea that like if you want to use Claude, you're going to have to share all your data with Anthropic, like that is
There,
not the
right.
case at all.
That is news that you can detach the model from the
100%.
company.
And like, all right, AWS, they give you the ability to do that with Mistral, with Anthropic models, with all of Hugging Face, right? Anything that's
Hmm.
in Hugging Face, you can like deploy it in Bedrock, and it's running on your own private instance of your cloud, right?
So,
So
like
the idea that like this, like having local models running on a Mac Studio solves some sort of problem for an
for
enterprise is nonsense.
enterprise,
Yeah.
I don't even know, like the way you're describing it, like I'm not even sure it solves a problem for me. You know what I mean? Like one of my open claws, for example, is already on a VPS. Like I guess that's not local, but I mean it's on the machine that I pay for. I control all of it.
You're running a model locally on that machine, but that machine isn't running locally to you.
Right. But are we getting hung up on like the semantics of the local part? But either
No,
way,
because like that's when I'm going to get into the difference between like what is infrastructure as a service versus platform as a service. And when you're running a model locally on that VPS server, that's like an infrastructure as a service. You've built a like the portion of the stack that AWS is managing for you is just the compute layer, like the hardware and the network cabling and the data center, right? They're like, all right, we'll take care of this. Everything else is all you. You want to build a server, you build a server, whatever you want to put on it. You
it's
want to put an
essentially the
alarm on
equivalent of a computer in your
under your
office, right?
desk.
Like
It's just running up in the
here's a
cloud, right?
box. You have to do
That's
everything about it.
not what Bedrock is, and that's not how you would run an Anthropic model. You
Uh-huh.
can't do that, right? You can't
Uh-huh.
like run Anthropic on a server. Like it takes too much compute power. It doesn't run on Windows or Linux, right? It runs on like the NVIDIA operating system on their massive GPUs. So what
Right.
AWS does is they like provide you with a service, and they're like, "Yo, we run all that stuff, all the craziness that you need in order to run Anthropic's model. We do that for you. Actually, we do that for Anthropic, right? We're running it for them. We'll run it for you too, right? And
Right.
that's Bedrock. That's AWS Bedrock, and that's like and that's AWS's product. Azure, Microsoft's cloud, they've got the Azure AI
Hmm.
Studio where you can run open AI models, right? And like for a while, that was sort of like the differentiator. It's like if you wanted
Hmm.
open AI, you had to go to
You have to
Azure.
go to Azure.
If you wanted Anthropic, you'd go to AWS, and that is
But
now
the
like
point here
being
is that the point here isn't which company, right? But it's that enterprise does have access to something akin to what we would call like a local setup,
local, like
right?
the
Because it
problem
gets
you're
walled
solving without
off.
right
So why is this even being talked about in the way? All right, like,
now.
or there are other problems to solve, and like this isn't even the problem. Because I think
It's
there's a lot to
going to.
talk about in the conversation about open source and about local and about
I'd
portability
say the
that can be
differentiator, the
learned.
true
There's a lot of things to
differentiator.
learn from that conversation, I think, that could be applied.
I think the true differentiator between like local, honestly, the true differentiator between like local and hosted is how are you paying for it? Are you paying for the raw compute and then you're hosting your own model, or are you being charged in tokens? Right. So like honestly,
Yes,
that
that's
is
a good way
probably
to,
the
and I
differentiator.
think that's where this is starting. I think because it's pretty, it's not cheap to be all in on AI right now, from my perspective. So, and
But that is the limiting differentiator, though.
I think that's right.
It's not the data sovereignty. It's not the
I think
privacy.
that's right. Yeah, that's
It
a good
is
point.
in like, am I paying for now in the cloud? You're going to pay for CPU utilization, right? Compute
Right.
utilization. Like there's some sort of invented marker for that represents like how much compute you used, and you'll pay that toll road versus the toll road of like AI tokens.
Yeah, but I
It's
mean, like
different,
for a
but it's
VPS, it's a monthly fee, right? At least it's one number. It's not
not.
like
It is not one number. It is pay as you go, right? So like that, you're like when you pay for a VPS, right? There is the cost of running that server on, like just having it on and running it all month, right? Let's call that $10 a month, right?
hmm
But like it's $10 a month if it's on and doing nothing. Just on,
hmm
it's $10 a month. Suppose I'm crushing that CPU and utilizing 100% of the memory the entire time. Is it still $10 a month? No way. Maybe it's $40 a month now because you're paying for CPU utilization. You're paying for
Sure.
cycles, right?
Okay.
And so, like, the more
It,
you use that CPU, like, the more it's going to cost you.
it's
It's
still going
not
to be
just
way
on.
less than paying an API token cost to a frontier model. If you have a open model living on that VPS, crunching essentially free tokens because you're paying for the compute, that's way cheaper than paying for tokens,
And
right?
this
So
is
it,
why, too, like, we'll start getting into like you'd run it on a container versus you'd run it on a container versus running it on compute, or like a computer, right? Because a container will spin up and spin down as
yes.
you need
Yeah.
it. Anyway, we're digressing. I think we could probably like wrap
Yeah,
it
we
up
could wrap up because
here.
yeah, like the conversation from here on, and maybe it's another episode. Maybe we'll do it next week. Is to dig further into the conversation that I think is occurring a lot right now in the AI enthusiast community, YouTube world. It, local is a part of it, but I'm seeing the way I'm seeing it is that it's a bundled conversation, and local is part of it, portability is part of it. I guess privacy is part of it, but you're kind of pointing out that maybe that's a bit of a red herring to some degree.
You could be paying in tokens and still keeping all your data private.
Yeah, right. So that would be. I would like to do that for my own benefit. Let's pull that conversation apart because I'm also halfway doing it already, and one of my parallel projects is to continue building a kind of what I'm calling local, but it's really on a VPS, but I think that's the same difference. But the point is, like, I'm experimenting with building stacks of different capable models,
Right.
and it's really influenced by just like not so much privacy on my end, but understanding what we said many times before, that the right amount of AI is the least amount of AI, and combining that with bringing my monthly expenditure down, right? Like I can do maybe 60, 80% of the same build work that I'm doing essentially for free, for paying for compute instead of paying for tokens. And when you're coming from not an enterprise bankroll, all those little things make a difference. And I think a lot of the ideas that are coming out to create these stacks are coming out of the nature of like trying to solve the problem of like, I'd really like to spend less on this every month. So let me see how I can do that and still get the quality outputs that I'm getting right now. And those are the things that I think an enterprise, among other things, can still learn is distributing compute, distributing
but there is like a gap
LLMs
between like the understanding of like AI enthusiasts and knowing where it is right now, and also like understanding why the enterprise isn't there yet. Like I feel like there's a gap that like they have two different ideas of like even what the problem is.
Right.
But anyway, listen,
I think that's right.
I just been informed that my family has left without me, so I've got to run.
Go run and catch up with them.
Literally.
But
until next
all right,
week,
guys.
everybody, it's been a good chat.
Indeed. We'll see you soon.